So apparently the U.S. Treasury Department is examining JPMorgan's relationship with a hedge fund that is said to be part of a network that's overseen by Iranian oil trader Hossein Shamkhani. We want to understand sort of more on this. What might this violate in terms of sanctions or not? So here to break it down for us is Elliot Stein, Bloomberg Intelligence litigation analyst. Can you just give us the facts first?
Yeah, so, I mean, the investigation's early, the reporting is early, a lot of unknowns, both known and unknown at this point. But it sounds like the Treasury Department is investigating JPMorgan in relation to its connection to this hedge fund that's based in London and Dubai, and the hedge fund's connection to an oil trader. And it sounds like the overall investigation is focused on the oil trader, but the Treasury Department's also looking at JPMorgan to make sure that it followed its due diligence and did its KYC and know your customer and AML compliance processes.
And I guess I'm just looking at the Bloomberg reporting. I guess folks there say JPMorgan feels like they don't need to do anything here because neither the Shamkhani guy nor the company appear in any sanctions list, I guess.
Right, yeah, and this may be a nothing burger. There may be nothing there. Best case scenario, or one possible scenario where JPMorgan has no exposure, is that maybe it did all its due diligence and it was misled by the companies it was doing its due diligence on. That's just one possibility. But worst case scenario, it didn't do its due diligence, right, or it ignored red flags, and we've seen, recently with TD Bank, what that can amount to.
So if this oil trader did have a relationship with this individual from Iran, what does that potentially violate? What are the sanctions and the rules currently that would make that a problem?
Right. So, banks should not be doing business with companies that are under sanctions or on, special lists. And so it's unclear what the connection is, though, to this oil trader. Mm-hmm. Apparently, he is the son of someone who was in the Ayatollah's inner circle. So there may be some connections. But we've seen in the past that banks have paid billions of dollars for doing transactions with the Iranian government or other Iranian entities that are on sanctions lists. So it can be very costly. But it's not clear that the investigation is even focused on that. It may be sort of just to make sure that JPMorgan was doing its due diligence.
And doing through the training here at Bloomberg about this type of issues. This is
exactly
the type of training that
the same thing.
We receive, and I'm sure everybody across the industry to various degrees receives about, hey, if you're doing business with somebody that may or may not be on a list, just stop. Call your boss, call compliance, see what the gig is before you move forward.
Well, it sounds like this could be like a third derivative.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's why there's a lot of unknowns here. The bank may have no exposure, but anytime you're talking about sanctions on Iran and banks doing transactions, indirectly as well, your eyebrows get raised, and banks have paid a lot of money in the past for failures related to this.
Do we feel that sanctions could get more strenuous under President Trump? What are you thinking about?
Certainly possible, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I would expect that.
All right, so I'm looking at JPMorgan stocks up 1% today, up 45% year to date. So I'm assuming the market's discounting this as a non-risk issue. How about other litigation that you're working? What else are you working on? Because you do the litigation that companies have to deal with. That can move stocks.
Absolutely. And actually, in this arena, there are several other banks that are under investigation for either AML violations or potentially sanctions violations. UBS is being investigated in connection with clients that it took over from Credit Suisse, who may be in violation of sanctions on Russia. There's a Swedish bank, Swedbank, that has been under investigation for AML violations for years now, so I'm waiting for a penalty there. There's a Turkish bank, Halkbank, that was indicted by the U.S. government for violating sanctions on Iran. So that's one area I'm looking at. Another big area right now is all these rules and regulations that the SEC and other regulators have put into place under the Biden administration. There's a lot of lawsuits over them, and so we're waiting to see what's going to happen with the rules and with the lawsuits.
What else would a Trump victory mean for your world?
Right, so in connection with these rules and regulations that the SEC has promulgated during the Biden administration, and the CFPB as well, we're expecting a lot of the rules and regulations to maybe be paused in terms of enforcing them, and then the regulators will probably go back and revisit the rules, but that takes a while. I'm also, attuned to the courts as well, and I'm particularly interested in seeing whether the two oldest justices on the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito, retire probably at some point during this next Trump administration.
Is that right?
In which case he would name the replacements, and you'll have a conservative majority for at least another generation on the Supreme Court.
Interesting. Wow. Because you started off fine going to Stanford, then you went to get a law degree.
I got a law
degree. It all turned south, man. What were you thinking?
Have you marked your calendar for the Stanford-Duke basketball game?
No, because we're now in the same conference, right?
Yeah.
When is that?
I don't have it on my calendar,
right,
but I think it's in January, maybe February.
All right, we'll check it out. Because Stanford is in the Atlantic Coast Conference. That makes sense.
Yeah, big game this weekend.
My Duke field hockey team had a little problem getting out to the Bay Area for their games against Stanford. Because they had to, you're in Durham, you have to transfer and connect. And I'm like, why are my kids going out to San Francisco? It's just, the whole thing's a mess. Elliot Stein, Bloomberg Intelligence litigation analyst, joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio.